In this video, we explore the most profound and misunderstood aspects of Ibn Arabi's metaphysics, the divine names and their role as Barzakh, the isthmus between God and creation. How can God remain absolutely independent while simultaneously revealing himself in intimate nearness? And what does it mean to speak of the God created in beliefs without compromising divine oneness? If you find this content meaningful and intellectually enriching, please consider supporting this small channel through monetary contribution. Your support helps sustain deeper explorations into Islamic metaphysics, philosophy, and spirituality. Thank you so much for your monetary support.
To say that the divine names provide us with positive knowledge of God means that we can affirm Him as the Creator. There is nothing controversial in this, since the Quran itself declares that God is the Creator, yet to call Him Creator necessarily implies the existence of a creature. This implication introduces the network of relationships that arise between God and creation. Ibn Arabi develops this insight through a series of polarities embedded in the Arabic language itself. He juxtaposes Khaliq, creator, with Makhluk, creature, Rab, Lord, with Marbub, vassal or one governed, and Ilah, God with Malu, that which is godded over, sometimes rendered as divine thrall. Because Arabic operates through trilateral verbal roots, the existence of one term linguistically necessitates its counterpart. In the same way, within reality, one pole of a relational pair calls forth the other. Thus, there can be no vassal without a lord, no divine thrall without a god, no creature without a creator, no object of knowledge, malam, without a knower, alim. By extension, without the loci in which divine activity becomes manifest, the divine names themselves would have no intelligible meaning. Unless we are speaking of the divine essence in absolute abstraction, to speak of God is always to speak of a relationship between al-Haq and al-Khalq, creation. At first glance, this polarity suggests a codependence between the two sides of each pair, such as lord and vassal. One might readily accept that the vassal depends on the lord for its existence, but does Ibn Arabi truly claim that the lord likewise depends on the vassal? In fact, this is precisely his point. Just as the vassal depends upon the lord, so the very meaning and manifestation of lord depend upon the existence of the vassal. The same applies to God, Ilah, and the one who is godded over. As Ibn Arabi states, quote, "Were the essence stripped of these relationships, it would not be a god. Our entities occasion these relationships. Through our being divine thralls, we make him a god. He is not known until we are known."
Such statements scandalized more exoteric scholars. However, within Ibn Arabi's metaphysical framework, the distinction between divine essence and divinity clarifies the matter. The essence in itself remains absolutely independent and beyond all relations.
Divinity, however, functions precisely through creating and entering into relationships with created things. By the very logic of relation, there cannot be a creator without the created. Once created things are acknowledged, the creator who brought them into being is also known. God's independence is therefore preserved, since it is not the essence as such that requires the cosmos, but rather the relational dimension through which the divine names become manifest. Quote, "That which turns its attention toward bringing everything other than God into existence is the divinity through its properties, relations, and attributions. It is these which call for effects. It is impossible that there might be one that overpowers without something overpowered, or a powerful without an object of power. It is specifically the properties of divinity that call for effects, whereas the divinity itself simply turns its attention. In referring to the properties, relations, and attributions of divinity, Ibn Arabi has in view the divine names. It is these names that require, indeed desire, the cosmos, the arena within which their effects may be displayed and manifested in particular lotzi. In what follows, Ibn Arabi further clarifies his position on the interdependence between God and creation, as well as the function of the most beautiful names, Asma'ul Husna. Quote, "You should know, O seeker of truth, that Al-Haq possesses mercy, pardon, generosity, forgiveness, and other things of this sort which have been mentioned as his most beautiful names. He possesses these in reality. He also possesses vengeance and terrible assault. So, he is compassionate, pardoner, generous, forgiver, and possessor of vengeance. It is impossible that the effects of these names be found within him, or that he be a locus for their effects. So, toward whom is he compassionate? Whom does he pardon? To whom is he generous? Whom does he forgive? From whom does he exact vengeance?" Hence one has to say that God the Creator demands created things, and the created things demand the Creator. Therefore, there must be a cosmos, since the divine realities demand it. According to Ibn Arabi, the transcendent God describes himself and renders himself immanent through the divine names. These names are infinite in number, though they are often epitomized in the well-known list of the 99 most beautiful names. Through them, the human being may come to know something about God. They serve as the connection or link between humanity and the divine.
For this reason, the divine names possessed an intermediate reality. In Ibn Arabi's terminology, anything that has such an intermediate status is designated by the Quranic term as Barzakh or ismus. In this sense, the divine names function as the Barzakh between God and creation.
Quote, "Know that the word Barzakh is an expression for what separates two things without ever becoming either of them. So, each of those two things, when they are adjacent to each other, has need of a Barzakh which is not the same as each of them, but which has in itself the power of each of them. The divine names are neither identical with God nor with creation, yet as the Barzakh between the two, their function is both to separate and to conjoin them, and to possess, each according to its degree, the power and properties of both sides. This is why they are said to have an intermediate reality. Another way of expressing this is to say that the divine names have an imaginal reality. As Chittick explains for Ibn Arabi, quote, "An imaginal, not imaginary, reality is one that dwells in an intermediate domain between two other realities and shares in the attributes of both sides. An imaginal thing is both the same as and different from each of the two sides that define it." While Ibn Arabi's concept of imagination, al-khayal, has been discussed at greater length in other videos, it is sufficient for now to note that to describe a divine name as an imaginal reality is simply to underscore its intermediacy and ambiguity, both defining characteristics of imagination, which Ibn Arabi therefore also identifies as a barzakh. If created beings seem to possess attributes that properly belong to the Creator, or if divine qualities appear reflected in creatures, this is due to the intermediacy of the divine names. The names both connect and distinguish the true possessor of attributes, divinity, from those who are described by them, creatures. As Ibn Arabi states, quote, The divine names are the Barzakh between us and the named. They look upon him since they name him, and they look upon us since they bestow upon us effects attributed to the named. So they make the name known, and they make us known. Because a divine name is a Barzakh, its reality lies between the divine reality and our own. For this reason, it can look upon us and bestow effects while still referring back to the named, that is, God himself. From this perspective, creation, especially the human being, stands as the recipient of the self-manifestation of the divine names. Ibn Arabi therefore refers to each divine name as a Rab, Lord or Sustainer, which necessarily has its corresponding marbub or vassal among created beings. This does not imply a plurality of competing gods. Rather, as Izutsu observes, a central element of Ibn Arabi's theology is the distinction between Allah and Rab. The Lord, or Rab, is al-Haq, as manifested through a specific name, whereas Allah designates the divine essence qualified by all attributes. Corbin explains that Allah names the essence in its totality, while the Rab is the divine being particularized and personified through one specific name or attribute. Here lies the secret of the divine names and what Ibn Arabi calls the God created in beliefs. That is, God as disclosed within the horizon of a particular belief. Since the divine name stands as an intermediate reality between God and creation, it is neither simply God nor other than God. As Lord, it requires one who is lorded over. Allah, by contrast, is the all-comprehensive name, embracing and uniting all other names, even those that appear mutually contradictory. Because no human being can grasp all the divine names simultaneously, no one calls upon Allah in his total comprehensiveness. Rather, each person calls upon God through a particular name, whether consciously or not.
Thus, in prayer, one addresses one's own personal Lord, that is, the divine as disclosed according to one's belief. This is what Ibn Arabi means by the God created in beliefs.
The Lord, as a specific divine name, is not identical with Allah, who is the Lord of Lords, Rabbul Arbab. Instead, the Lord is God as revealed to a particular servant. The Lord is called the created God in beliefs because, as a Barzakh, it shares in the qualities of both sides it mediates. In this sense, the Lord is neither purely creator nor purely created, yet reflects aspects of both. As Corbin puts it, this is, quote-unquote, the God who creates himself in these beliefs. And as Chittick clarifies, the God of belief is itself the merciful self-disclosure of al-Haq. Thus, one's personal Lord, through whom one worships God and whom God himself has commanded us to invoke by his names, is a merciful self-manifestation through which the divine essence becomes knowable, not as that essence in itself, but as Ilah, or divinity. Yet, since there is no God, Ilah, but God, Allah, all worship ultimately belongs to Allah alone. What has just been outlined reiterates a central point. Divinity is the medium through which the essence enters into tashbih, similarity, while the essence in itself remains in tanzih, incomparability. In this way, divinity functions as an intermediary between the essence and creation. Once the essence enters into delimitation, we are no longer speaking of the essence as such, essence qua essence, but of the level of the essence known as divinity. Yet these are not two separate realities, for there is no reality but reality. Rather, divinity as divinity accepts both the names of tanzih and the names of tashbih. It thus embodies the coincidence of opposites, Jamul al-Adad, and is therefore marked by ambiguity. since the divine names are themselves characterized by intermediacy and ambiguity, and since each name acts as a Barzakh, or as a Lord, between creature and divinity, who is Allah, the Lord of Lords, and the all-comprehensive name, it follows that divinity itself must also be described as a Barzakh. This is indeed Ibn Arabi's position. He maintains that it is not correct for al-Haq and creation to come together in any mode whatsoever in respect of the essence, only in respect of the fact that the essence is described by the divinity. In other words, any meeting between God and creation occurs not at the level of the essence, but at the level of divinity. Quote, "The divinity confronts the creatures through its own specific essence as divinity, and it confronts the essence through its own essence. It has a face toward creation through which it discloses itself in the forms of creation. It has a face toward the essence through which it becomes manifest to the essence. So the created things do not know the essence except from behind this Barzakh, which is the divinity. Nor does the essence exercise properties within the created things except through this Barzakh, which is the divinity. We have verified it, and we have found it no different from the most beautiful names by which we call upon it. So the essence compels the cosmos only through the divine names, and the cosmos knows nothing of al-Haq but these most beautiful divine names. The divine Barzakh, that is, divinity, enables the essence to remain utterly transcendent and unknowable, while at the same time bringing creation into relationship with it through its own mediating function. As a Barzakh, it distinguishes without separating absolutely. The essence remains the independent, al-Ghani, and creation remains the poor, al-Fakir. The fixed ontological asymmetry between God and the cosmos is thus preserved. Yet a Barzakh not only distinguishes, it also combines within itself the properties of the two realities it mediates. For this reason, Allah is described by both the names of incomparability, or tanzih, and the names of similarity, or tashbih. Quote, "The names that demand incomparability are the names which the essence demands in itself, while the names which demand similarity are the names which the essence demands inasmuch as it is a God. The names of incomparability are those such as independent and one, and all those which can only be possessed by Him, while the names of similarity are those such as compassionate, forgiving, and everything by which the servant may truly be qualified."
Thus, the names of incomparability correspond to tanzih, and the names of similarity to tashbih. In speaking of God, both must be affirmed as the Quran itself does.
Although divinity, the divine Barzakh, can be viewed from these two perspectives, and although Ibn Arabi says that it has a face toward creation and a face toward the essence, this does not imply duality within it. The Barzakh is not a two-sided mediator in which one aspect relates to God and another to creation. Rather, the very same reality, its single essence, encounters both domains. The Barzakh is one entity. In other words, divinity faces the essence with the same face that it faces creation. It is simultaneously transcendent and immanent, yet remains one in accordance with the divine unity. When the servant realizes and affirms this truth, he affirms Tawhid, the declaration that God is al-Wahid, the One. However, Tawhid cannot be fully realized without knowledge of God. According to Akbarian metaphysics, just as there are two fundamental modes in which God is perceived, transcendence and immanence, so too are there two corresponding modes of knowing. Knowledge of tanzih is generally associated with reason, while knowledge of tashbih is linked to imagination or khayal. To grasp the significance of these two epistemic paths, one must further explore the dynamic between divine transcendence and immanence. For Ibn Arabi's understanding of the intimate interplay between tanzih and tashbih has direct implications for epistemology. In summary, we have seen that for Ibn Arabi, the divine names function as an intermediate reality, a Barzakh, through which the unknowable essence enters into relationship with creation without ever ceasing to be absolutely transcendent. Divinity is the level at which God accepts both tanzih and similarity tashbih, embodying the coincidence of opposites while remaining one. Each divine name discloses a particular Lord, Rabb, through whom human beings come to know and worship God according to their capacity. Yet all worship ultimately belongs to Allah, the all-comprehensive name.
The epistemological consequence is equally profound. Reason apprehends transcendence, imagination apprehends immanence, and true Tawhid lies in affirming both without contradiction. Thank you so much for watching and engaging with these reflections, and a special thanks to Sean Wang for the generosity and continued support in my Patreon.